Hi, thanks for joining me today in another episode in our study of the Sermon on the Mount. In today's study, we're going to examine the subject of honesty. The text for today is found in Matthew chapter 5 and verses 33 through 37. So let's go ahead and read the text. Jesus says, "Again you have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, Thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou cannot make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yes, yes, no, no. For whatsoever is more than these comes of evil." Now, certainly by this point in the sermon, you all have come to the conclusion that the Pharisees had corrupt hearts, and this certainly is noticed in their dishonesty. We've said before that the Pharisees view something as being right as long as it's legal. As long as something's legal, it is right. And so, under that framework, their understanding of honesty is entirely shaped by the subject of perjury. They obsess over perjury, not honesty. What this meant in practicality was as long as you don't perjure yourself, then you are all right. Jesus exposes some of this thinking in how they would take oaths. They had a very convoluted system of oath taking. For example, Jesus deals with this in other places in Matthew 22, where he talks about how the Pharisees, they thought that if you took an oath on the temple, you could break the oath. But if you took the oath on the gold of the temple, well, that was a different story. You had to keep it. And Jesus exposes how ridiculous that thinking is. What Jesus demands is that we practice honesty in every area, in every situation, in every dealing, in every interaction with people. That certainly is challenging. It's very easy for us to be dishonest. It's very tempting to be deceptive at times when our own self-interest is at stake. Jesus, though, demands if we're going to be part of his kingdom, we must practice honesty. One of the things that the Pharisees failed to realize, and which is something that we forget sometimes, is that, as Jesus would say in Matthew chapter 12, we are going to be held accountable for every word that we speak. Whether or not we were under an oath, whether or not we were contractually obligated, we're accountable for our words. So what can we say of the state of honesty today? Have we forgotten what honesty is? It would appear with some people it seems to be the case. Honesty has to do with being honorable in principle, in intention, and in action. It has to do with being upright and fair, being unadulterated, being respectful, truthful, and credible. When that's what we are, then we produce character of integrity. In the past, people have sought to promote this idea that absolute truth does not exist. And it seems to be the motivation for that is an effort to redefine morality. That we want to be able to live any old way we want without anyone else casting aspersion upon us. Well, it seems a similar thing is done regarding ethics. And honesty certainly has to do with ethics. Today, ethics are redefined. Basically, the situation that we're in is supposed to determine how we go about being honest. And perhaps we will condone deception and dishonesty if it's in our own best interest or in the best interest of our loved ones. In Habakkuk, chapter 1 and verse 4, I know it, the all but forgotten prophet Habakkuk, he says something of Israel's society, which is very, very relatable with ours today. He says of them that the law is paralyzed. Justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. And that often is the case with us today. Due to a lack of honesty, due to a lack of honesty, there seems to be a constant, ever-present suspicion that we have regarding our fellow man. We feel as if someone is always trying to take advantage of us or out to get us, and we become very guarded as a result of that. Love assumes the best, whereas deceit assumes the worst. And you see the difference between love and deceit, the difference in what it creates and produces. This sermon and Jesus is very much about love for God and love for our fellow man. If we're going to love our neighbor as ourselves, then it's going to result in us being honest and honorable with our fellow man. We're going to keep our word. We're going to honor our commitments. We're going to be people who seek truth. And when we find it, we're going to embrace it and promote it. Honesty becomes this indispensable quality of God's kingdom. It is the means by which we are able to encourage others to aspire to coming to the kingdom. So let's make a couple of points about honesty here, and the study will be yours. First of all, honesty compels us to admit when we're wrong and to seek reconciliation with those that we've hurt. Now, we've already examined the subject of reconciliation earlier in some of the things that Jesus has said in this sermon. But I suppose that admitting when we're wrong is very difficult for all of us. No one likes to admit when they're wrong in their thinking and in their actions. However, if we're honest, we'll be able to do that. Honesty is how we become accountable. It's how we make amends. And being accountable and making amends is not a sign of weakness. Admitting when you're wrong is not a sign of weakness. That is a sign of integrity. It shows your fellow man that you care about what is right. You care about what is fair. You care about truth. You care about how you treat other people. So honesty will compel us to admit when we're wrong and seek reconciliation. Secondly, honesty, it produces integrity and justice. It produces integrity and justice. Ignoring or unfairly applying the law is proof of a corrupt heart. It's proof of corrupt leadership in any context. Certainly, that's what Jesus was getting at with the Pharisees, their dishonesty. What was evidence that they were corrupt and that their leadership was ineffective. Personally, integrity and justice begins with me, and it begins with you. We must first be honest with ourselves. When we sit down with God's Word and we open it up and we read it and we study it, we then are left to make choices about what we're going to do with it in our lives. Are we going to change our lives to bring our hearts and minds into harmony with God's Word, or are we going to unfairly ignore it? In James chapter 1, James says that as we open God's Word, which he describes as a mirror to the soul, that we're to receive God's Word with meekness. If we're going to receive God's Word with meekness, in other words, that's going to mean that we're going to have to put aside our pride. If we've been thinking or doing things that are in opposition to the truth, then we're going to have to surrender and sacrifice those things and adopt new values, adopt new practices and principles. If we do that, well, then we will begin to grow into people who are people of integrity, people who are known for their fairness and equity. Lastly, honesty produces qualities which are attractive. Honesty will help us attract others to the kingdom. The Pharisees were corrupt, and anyone who knew the Pharisees recognized that. Jesus in this sermon and in his life brings clear a contrast in leadership, a contrast between himself and the Pharisees. Jesus is genuine. He's sincere. He's open and transparent. He wants everyone to know what he's about, what he has to offer, and what he wants us to do with him and his message. And honesty will do that. Honesty will produce transparency and openness in us. There was no pretense with Jesus. Sometimes there is, though, with us. Often we may try to advance our own self-interest without others knowing it. We may try to spin the truth in our favor, or maybe we try to withhold parts of the truth. Maybe even more brazenly, we just refuse to give explanations for our actions. Well, if that's our approach to how we interact with other people, people are going to be able to see that we're dishonest, and they're not going to want to have anything to do with us or with what we're trying to promote. Honesty will do just the opposite. Honesty will attract others to us. People want to be able to trust people. And if they can't trust the people of God, who can they trust? Well, no one. So in conclusion this morning, I hope that we will all seek to be people who are honest in our treatment of others. It's very difficult. It's very easy for us to lie and deceive. It's very tempting for us to try to advance our own self-interest. However, if we're going to seek the honesty that Jesus describes here, it will cause us to surrender our pride, and we will become people who are able to reflect God's glory and attract others to the kingdom. I thank you for listening today, and I hope that you'll join me in our next episode in our continued study with the Sermon on the Mount. Thank you.